Emma had always been the overlooked one in her family, the one who didn't quite fit in with the business world her mom had built. While her mother ran a thriving company, Emma quietly made her fortune on her own. But when a Thanksgiving dinner turns into a battleground of egos and unspoken truths, Emma decides it's time to stop being invisible. Little did her family know, Emma's quiet success was about to bring everything they'd built crashing down. The pattern started when Emma was just a kid. Her mom, Patricia, was always the ambitious one, the one who worked tirelessly on building her consulting firm from the ground up. Emma's dad wasn't really in the picture, so it was just the two of them. At 12 years old, Emma would sit at the kitchen table as her mom spread financial projections, client reports, and glossy folders across the surface. Emma would try to engage, ask questions about the numbers, about what they all meant. But every time she did, her mom's response was the same. "This is adult business. Emma, why don't you go practice your piano?" It wasn't that her mom was unkind. No, it was more like she saw Emma as, well, just a kid. A kid who wasn't meant to be part of the world of business. And so Emma would go, she'd retreat into the world of music, her mother's world of finance forever just out of reach. But Emma was curious, and that curiosity didn't just fade with age. At 16, while other kids were busy with their social lives and schoolwork, Emma was diving into books at the local library. She'd spend hours reading about venture capital, private equity, and growth investments, immersing herself in online forums where experts discuss strategies and stock picks. It was an entirely self-driven education. No one told her to do it, and certainly no one encouraged her. She did it because it was something that she felt deeply drawn to. The more she read, the more she realized how much she didn't know. But unlike her mother, she didn't need that validation from others. She found the knowledge for herself, and her accomplishments, well, they didn't come with applause from her family. By 22, she graduated top of her class at Wharton, not just with a degree, but with a full scholarship. Most kids would have expected their parents to celebrate something like that, but not Emma. When she told her mom, Patricia's response was, "Well, lukewarm. Business school is fine, dear, but don't expect to compete with people who grew up understanding money." Her mother said that like it was a fact of life, like it was an unspoken rule that Emma wasn't privy to. Patricia wasn't just talking about herself. She was talking about Emma's sister, Claire, who was studying for her MBA at a less competitive program. And of course, Claire got all the praise, all the recognition. But for Emma, the message was clear. No matter how well she did, no matter how much she learned, it would never be enough to match her mother's standards. And yet, Emma kept pushing forward. By 25, she'd made her first million not by inheriting money, not through family connections, but through careful investments in tech startups. At 28, her holdings were worth a staggering $47 million. But Emma didn't show it off. She lived modestly, a small apartment, a 10-year-old Honda, and she never mentioned her success to her family. To them, it wasn't about the numbers, it was about the perception of success, about the labels and titles that came with it. To them, what mattered was running your own business, starting from scratch and building something tangible, like her mom did. That was success. What Emma had built quietly in the background didn't matter. Her mother's business, Sterling Consulting, had grown steadily over the years. Patricia had started it when Emma was just 8 years old, and now, 24 years later, it had expanded to a firm with 35 employees. At every family dinner, Patricia couldn't help but talk about her business, how much revenue it had brought in, the clients she'd acquired, the expansion plans. It wasn't just conversation, it was like a constant reminder that her success was real, visible, and appreciated by everyone around her. While Emma, on the other hand, felt like a quiet observer, watching her family's interactions from the sidelines. One of the most striking moments of tension came during Emma's 30th birthday dinner. While most people would expect to hear birthday wishes and congratulations, the conversation instead revolved around business. "We're projecting $12 million in revenue this year," Patricia announced with pride, barely acknowledging the cake in front of her daughter. "The board is extremely pleased with our growth trajectory." And Claire, who had joined the firm after her MBA, chimed in, "Mom's been networking with potential investors. We might raise Series B funding next quarter." It wasn't a conversation for Emma. It never was. The attention was always on her mom's accomplishments, her mom's business. Emma tried to stay neutral. She nodded. "That's wonderful, Mom," she said quietly. But her mom wasn't done. "Emma," Patricia said, turning to her with that smile, the one that wasn't quite warm but wasn't quite dismissive either. "You should pay attention to this. This is how real business works, not those little online stock trades you do." She always said things like that, didn't she? Dismissive, patronizing, as if the investments Emma had carefully made weren't worth mentioning, as if the financial acumen she'd honed through years of reading, learning, and investing didn't count for anything. The truth was, Emma had been managing investments for years. She'd been a senior analyst at a respected firm, earning a good salary, $160,000 a year. But to her family, that wasn't real business. What they didn't know was that 3 years earlier, when Sterling Consulting was facing a serious cash flow crisis, Emma was the one who had quietly saved her mom's company. Patricia had no idea that her daughter was the anonymous investor who provided $95 million to cover the firm's aggressive expansion. Emma structured the investment through LLCs and investment vehicles, making sure there was no trace back to her. The terms were generous, just 8% annual return, but Emma didn't want recognition. She didn't want credit. She just wanted to help. For 3 years, she watched Sterling Consulting thrive, all thanks to the money Emma had quietly put in. And all the while, her mom continued to lecture her about business acumen, continuing to treat Emma's understanding of finance as a joke. Emma wasn't just being dismissed, she was being ignored. Her entire life, her success was invisible to the people who mattered most. But the thing about being invisible, it can make you realize just how much you're capable of when no one is watching. It's in that silence, that dismissal, that Emma started to believe that she didn't need her family's recognition to be successful. She was building her own empire, quietly, on her own terms. But the tension, the weight of it all, was never far from the surface. Thanksgiving dinner at her mom's house had always been a grand affair. 42 family members, all gathered in a space that felt more like a stage than a home. The dining room was impeccably decorated. The tables stretched so long it seemed to disappear into the horizon, piled high with a feast fit for royalty. The candles flickered, the laughter was loud, and for a brief moment, the tension that always lingered between them, the distance that had quietly built up over the years, seemed to melt away. That is, until the conversation turned to business and everything snapped back into place. Patricia, her mother, couldn't resist. Family dinners weren't for bonding or catching up. No, for her. It was just another opportunity to talk about her consulting firm, Sterling Consulting, and all the success it had brought her. It wasn't just dinner, it was another opportunity to display the empire she had built, the empire that had, for all intents and purposes, consumed her life, and everyone else seemed to feed into it, hanging on her every word as if she were royalty. "We're projecting $12 million in revenue this year," Patricia said, almost as if she were reciting a line she had rehearsed 100 times. She smiled, that smile that always made Emma feel small, like she was about to be schooled on what was truly important in life. "The board is extremely pleased with our growth trajectory." The way she said it was so proud, so assured, like she was stating some universal truth about the world. But to Emma, it was just another performance. Emma didn't respond right away. What could she say? She didn't have the energy to engage in one of those conversations anymore. The ones where her mother would look down on her career, her accomplishments, as if they were mere trivialities compared to the life Patricia had built. Emma's own success had been achieved quietly, without fanfare. By 25, she had made her first million investing in the tech sector, taking risks and studying market trends on her own. By 28, she had nearly $50 million in diversified holdings. And yet, at this dinner, it felt as if it didn't matter. None of it did. She could feel it in the air. This unspoken judgment. Claire, her older sister, sat beside Patricia, nodding along, naturally playing her role as the one who had followed in their mother's footsteps. Claire had her MBA and now worked as a senior vice president at Sterling Consulting, which Patricia constantly made sure to mention. Emma had never even mentioned her own portfolio to her family, not because she didn't want them to know, but because they wouldn't understand it anyway. Not in the way Patricia would want them to. They didn't see that Emma's success wasn't the same as theirs. She wasn't running a business. She wasn't doing things the right way, like their mother. Instead, she was doing things quietly, cautiously, in a way that, as her mom would say, just didn't count. And so, as usual, Patricia continued her monologue, telling everyone how wonderful her life had become, how Sterling Consulting was thriving, and how everything seemed to be in its place. Emma knew the script well. Patricia's company was a success, her revenue was growing, and she was the unquestioned queen of her own little business world. But to Emma, it all felt so hollow. What about her own work? What about the things she had done to achieve financial success? But the thing was, Emma was used to this. She had spent years listening to her mom talk about how much she knew about business, how much she'd done to build her empire. And Emma, well, she was just the girl who made a few safe investment choices, right? The one who had been cautioned to stay away from the real business world. But then, Patricia turned to her with that familiar, condescending smile. "Emma," she said, in the same tone she always used when she wanted to school her, "you should pay attention to this. This is how real business works, not those little online stock trades you do." The words stung, but Emma had learned long ago to suppress the urge to fight back. To her mother, Emma would always be the cautious one, the one who didn't understand real money. She had heard this line before, many times. It was a reminder of her place in this family, and it was in that moment, as her mother continued to belittle her achievements in front of everyone, that something inside Emma shifted. It wasn't the first time Patricia had dismissed her. It wasn't even the second. But something about that moment, the casual cruelty of it, the way Patricia had reduced Emma's quiet success to nothing more than a hobby, felt different. It felt like the final straw. Emma's own success, the millions she had earned, the investments she had carefully curated over the years, it didn't seem to matter here. She was still the little girl being told she didn't understand the adult world, the one who didn't have a seat at the grown-up table. She wasn't Claire, who had earned her place by following the prescribed path. She wasn't Patricia, who had built an empire from the ground up. She was the outsider, the one who made small choices, the one who played it safe. But Emma was tired of being invisible, tired of the constant dismissal, tired of sitting quietly and pretending like it didn't matter. What her family didn't know, what no one at this table had a clue about, was that Emma had saved their business. 3 years earlier, when Patricia's firm faced a serious cash flow problem, Emma had been the anonymous investor who provided the $95 million that kept Sterling Consulting afloat. She had structured the deal carefully, through a web of LLCs and investment vehicles, ensuring that her involvement would remain secret. Patricia had no idea it was her own daughter who had saved her company, and yet Patricia had spent those 3 years belittling Emma, calling her amateur, dismissing her as if she were nothing. Emma had spent the entire meal listening to her mom speak about her business, about how successful it was, about the Series B funding they were pursuing, about all the great things Patricia had achieved, and all the while, Emma's mind was elsewhere, running through the numbers in her head. She had already made the decision. She was going to pull her investment in that moment. As her mother continued to talk, Emma made a choice. She would withdraw the $95 million. She wasn't going to be a silent partner any longer. She wasn't going to continue to let her mother take credit for a success she didn't understand. She would pull her capital, and she would watch the consequences unfold. But for now, Emma said nothing. She sat there, quietly, smiling politely as her mother continued her soliloquy. Patricia didn't know what was coming. She didn't know that Emma had just decided to take her business and her own success into her hands. It was time to stop being the invisible one, the one who was always in the shadows. It was time for Emma to make a move, to show her family that she understood business better than they ever gave her credit for. And with that decision, the stage was set. The moment of truth was on its way. Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her lawyer. "Bank president needs to speak with you. Urgent regarding the sterling investment withdrawal." She read the message twice, the weight of the decision settling in. She had made up her mind. The withdrawal was happening. And in that moment, Emma knew that things were never going to be the same again. The days after Emma's decision to withdraw her $95 million investment from her mother's company were nothing short of chaotic. The initial shock rippled through her family, but it wasn't until the full weight of the consequences hit that everything began to unravel. Emma had expected some form of backlash. Her mother was nothing if not protective of her empire. But what she hadn't anticipated was the depth of Patricia's desperation, nor the profound shift in how her family would see her from that moment forward. It started subtly. Emma received a phone call from her lawyer just a few days after Thanksgiving, informing her that Sterling Consulting was beginning to feel the strain. "The board's aware of the withdrawal notice," he said. "They're worried. The bank has notified them, and the situation is rapidly evolving." Emma felt a strange sense of detachment as she listened to the details talk of cash flow problems, financial planning, and potential fallout. But it wasn't until the call ended that the reality of her actions settled in. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about everything her mother had worked for and everything Emma had been quietly building in the background. Back at her mother's house, the tension in the air was palpable. The night after Thanksgiving had been filled with forced smiles and awkward silences. No one quite knew what to say, but Emma's decision had clearly shaken everyone. Patricia tried to keep up the appearance of control, but Emma could see through it. Her mother was losing her grip, and it was becoming impossible to hide. Claire, her older sister, called Emma the next day. Her voice was tight with something Emma couldn't quite place: anger, disbelief, maybe a bit of betrayal. "Emma, what the hell did you do?" Claire's question wasn't one of curiosity. It was accusation wrapped in panic. "Do you have any idea what this means? You're pulling $95 million from the company from Mom." She's freaking out. Emma had always known that Claire would side with their mother. She'd watched it play out for years, the unquestioned loyalty, the unspoken alliance. Claire had followed their mother's path, joined the family business, and embraced the role of the dutiful daughter. Emma, on the other hand, had always been the outsider. But hearing the panic in Claire's voice made something inside Emma shift. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, about the way her family had consistently underestimated her, treated her as if she didn't know anything about what truly mattered. "Claire, I did what I had to do," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. "Mom doesn't understand business. She's been playing a dangerous game with her company, and I couldn't just sit back and watch. You've seen what she's done. She's overextended everything, but Claire didn't want to hear it. She never had. Mom built this business from nothing, and now you're just going to tear it all down. You don't get to make that decision, Emma. You don't understand what you've done. It was a fight that Emma had been anticipating, but the emotional weight of it, the betrayal, the anger, the fear hit her harder than she'd expected. For the first time, she truly realized just how deep the divide was between her and her family. They didn't get it. They didn't understand how Emma could have made her decision so decisively, so quickly. But the truth was, Emma had been living in the shadow of their dismissive attitudes for years. Now, she was taking control. As the days passed, Emma watched as her mother's company began to show signs of cracking. The phone calls from Patricia's business partners became more frequent. The meetings at Sterling Consulting were urgent, filled with tense voices and talk of bankruptcy. Patricia's calm exterior began to erode. She started to avoid Emma, as if she didn't know how to face her daughter anymore. It was clear now Patricia had no idea how to handle a business crisis without the silent partner who had been funding her success for the past 3 years. Then came the phone call. Emma had been bracing herself for it, but it still came as a shock when Patricia finally reached out, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "Emma, we need to talk," her mother said. It wasn't a request, it was a plea. "You have to come over." Emma had no idea what to expect when she walked into her mother's house later that day. She found Patricia sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in hand, her usual poised demeanor shattered. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes looked red, as if she hadn't slept in days. Claire was sitting beside her, her face pale, but she didn't look at Emma when she walked in. Patricia didn't waste time. "You've destroyed everything," she said, her voice cracking. The words were harsh, but they weren't as angry as Emma had expected. There was a deep sadness in her mother's tone, a realization that was slowly dawning on her. "I've worked my whole life to build this business. Emma, I've sacrificed everything for it, and now, you're just pulling the rug out from under me. I can't." She stopped, her words failing her. Emma stood there, frozen. She had expected anger, but she hadn't anticipated this level of despair. Patricia was broken, not just because of the financial strain, but because of what the loss represented. The loss wasn't just about the $95 million. It was about the realization that her daughter had been the silent force behind her success all along. It was about the truth that Patricia had been dismissing Emma for years, had been treating her as less than, while Emma quietly built the empire her mother could never see. "You never understood, did you?" Emma's voice was calm, but there was a bite to it now. "I didn't pull the investment to hurt you, Mom. I did it because you've been reckless with your company. You didn't even know how close you were to falling apart." Patricia's face twisted with a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "But you were helping me, Emma. You were saving us. Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you let me know?" Emma's heart clenched, but she forced herself to keep calm. "I never wanted credit. I never wanted to be seen as your hero. I did it because I believed in you, in the business. But you've been treating me like I don't understand anything, like my success doesn't matter, and now you're asking me to fix everything." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of Patricia's shaky breath. Finally, she spoke again, this time with a note of pleading. "You're my daughter, Emma. I love you. Please, don't do this. You can't leave me like this. Please help me." Emma's resolve softened for a moment, but she knew this was her moment, the moment she had been waiting for. "I've done all I can, Mom. But you have to see this for what it is. You built this business with other people's money, not your own. I was that money." It was the truth, and Patricia didn't want to hear it. But it was out now, and it changed everything. There was no going back from this moment, no going back from the truth. Emma had been holding inside for so long. As the conversation ended, Emma felt the weight of the decision she had made settling in. She had known it would cause pain, but she hadn't fully understood just how much her family's world would shatter. Claire wouldn't speak to her, and Patricia was left trying to pick up the pieces of a broken empire. The next few days were filled with calls and meetings from the board, from investors, from the bank. Sterling Consulting was officially on the verge of collapse. But to Emma, it was clear. She hadn't destroyed the business. She had just stopped pretending it was something it wasn't. The business had been built on capital her mother didn't even understand. And now the truth was coming to light. Patricia's desperation became more apparent with each passing day. She would call Emma at odd hours, asking if there was any way to reverse the withdrawal, to save the business. But Emma stood firm. She was done being the silent partner, the invisible force behind the scenes. Now her family would finally see her. And maybe, just maybe, they would learn to respect her the way they had never done before. It was the hardest decision Emma had ever made, but it was also the most necessary. Her family had to face the truth, and she had to stop being the one who always bailed them out. The next few weeks would be filled with fallout, but Emma had made peace with it. The family had underestimated her for years, and now it was time for them to understand exactly what she was capable of. The final confrontation between Emma and her mother had been a long time coming. For years, Emma had silently watched from the sidelines, quietly making her own success while being overlooked and dismissed. But now, everything was coming to a head. The tension in the room was thick as Emma stood in her mother's living room, her heart pounding in her chest. Patricia was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and desperation. Claire, standing in the corner, refused to meet Emma's gaze. The air was heavy with unspoken words, the weight of everything that had been left unsaid finally crashing down on them. Patricia spoke first, her voice trembling. "Emma, I need you to understand. This isn't just about money. It's about everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed. And now, you're pulling it all away." There was a plea in her voice, a silent cry for help that Emma had heard 1,000 times before. But now it felt different. Now, Emma was the one holding all the cards, the one who had taken control of her own future, and Patricia was the one begging for a lifeline. Emma stood tall, her voice steady, despite the emotions swirling inside her. "I understand more than you think. Mom, I understand everything. I understand what it's like to pour everything you have into something, only to have it fall apart because you didn't truly understand it. I understand what it feels like to be invisible, to be the one who's never given credit for what they've done." Patricia's eyes widened, a flicker of realization crossing her face. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, invisible?" Emma let out a breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "I've been invisible for years, Mom. I've been quietly supporting you, quietly saving your business while you took all the credit. You never once acknowledged that I was the one behind it all. You never once treated me like I mattered. I built my own success. And all you ever did was tell me I didn't understand business, that I didn't know what I was doing." Patricia flinched, as if struck by the truth. "I never meant for it to be like that. Emma, I've always..." Emma cut her off, her voice rising, the frustration and hurt that had been building for so long spilling out. "You've always treated me like I was less than. You've always dismissed my career, my success, as if it didn't count. I was the one who saved your company when it was on the brink of collapse. I was the one who provided the $95 million that kept Sterling Consulting from going under. And you didn't even know it was me." There was a long pause. Patricia's face drained of color, and for the first time, Emma saw a crack in her mother's carefully constructed armor. The realization of what Emma had just said hit her like a ton of bricks. You were the one." Emma nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "Yes, it was me, and you never even knew. I didn't want recognition. I didn't want credit, but I also didn't want to be treated like I didn't know anything about business. I've been invisible to you, Mom, and I'm done with it. Patricia stared at her, the magnitude of the truth slowly settling in. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes filled with tears, and Emma could see the desperation and guilt overtaking her mother. You were the one all this time? Why didn't you just tell me? Emma's voice softened, but the conviction was still there. Because it wasn't about telling you, Mom. It was about you realizing what I was doing, about you seeing me for who I really am. I didn't need to be your hero. I didn't need you to praise me. I just needed you to acknowledge me, to treat me like I was part of this, like my work mattered. Patricia reached out, her hand trembling. Emma, please, I didn't know. I didn't realize what I was doing. Her voice broke, and the tears started to fall. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see you. The rawness of the moment hit Emma like a wave. All the years of being overlooked, all the times her mother had belittled her, all the quiet sacrifices she had made, it all flooded back. But Emma held firm, her voice steady as she spoke the words that would change everything. I'm sorry too, Mom, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep supporting a business that doesn't respect me, that doesn't respect what I've built. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being the one who always bails you out. It's time for you to see the truth. For a moment, there was silence. The room was thick with the weight of Emma's words, and for the first time in years, she felt something. Her mother was broken, the facade of control finally crumbling. Patricia had always prided herself on her success, on her ability to build something from nothing. But now, she was faced with the truth. Her success had never been entirely her own. Claire, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up, her voice quiet but laced with anger. Emma, you don't get to just take everything away like this. You don't get to decide for all of us. Mom built this company. She's the one who worked day and night to get here. Emma turned to her sister, her gaze unwavering. I'm not taking anything away. Claire, I'm just taking back what's mine. I'm done playing small to make everyone else feel comfortable. This company, this empire is built on my capital. And if Mom had actually seen that, maybe things would have turned out differently. Patricia collapsed back into her chair, her face twisted in anguish. What have I done? What have I done to you? Emma's voice softened, but her decision was final. You didn't see me, Mom, and now you will. The next few days were a blur. The phone calls came in waves. Business partners, board members, even the bank president, all desperate to know how to fix the damage. But Emma didn't have the answers. She had already made her decision, and it was done. Sterling Consulting, without the $95 million, was doomed. Emma had stopped being the silent supporter, she had stopped being invisible, and now, the consequences of her family's treatment of her were unfolding in real time. As Patricia's empire crumbled, Emma stood firm. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't gloating, she was simply done with being the person who always came to the rescue. She had given her mother everything: money, support, love, and in return, she had been told she wasn't good enough. But now, Emma was walking away from the wreckage, stepping into a future where she would never again have to hide in the shadows. The collapse of Sterling Consulting wasn't her doing. It was simply the inevitable result of a business built on the very things Patricia had never seen: honesty, respect, and the understanding that Emma's success was just as real as anyone else's. As the dust settled, Emma stood in the distance, watching the collapse of her mother's business. It was strange, really, how something so monumental could feel so inevitable. The phone calls stopped coming in, the urgent meetings slowed down, and soon, The only sound was the quiet hum of life moving forward without Sterling Consulting at the center. For the first time in years, Emma felt a sense of peace. The destruction of her mother's company, the crumbling of everything Patricia had worked for, was the result of choices that had been years in the making. But Emma wasn't the one who destroyed it. She simply stopped pretending it was built on anything solid. As she reflected on everything that had happened, the countless hours spent in silence, the years of being dismissed, the constant reminder that she wasn't enough, she realized how far she had come. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove herself to people who couldn't or wouldn't see her. But now, she was free. Free from the weight of expectations, free from the role she had been forced into, the one that had never been her own. She had walked away from her past, from a family who never understood her worth, and in doing so, she had claimed her independence. Emma knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments when the pain of the past crept up on her, when the family she had once tried so hard to fit into would reach out, asking for help, asking for forgiveness. But that wasn't her responsibility anymore. Her future was hers to shape, her investments, her portfolio, her success. Those were the things that mattered now, and no one could take that from her. She thought about her career, about the quiet way she had built something real, something substantial. She hadn't done it for recognition or accolades. She had done it for herself, and that was enough. In the end, she realized the greatest act of power wasn't in building something big or flashy. It was in walking away from the things that didn't serve you, from the people who couldn't see you for who you truly were. The greatest act of power was knowing your worth and refusing to settle for anything less. Emma smiled to herself, a quiet, knowing smile. She was ready to move forward. Her portfolio would continue to grow, her investments would continue to flourish, but now she would do it without the shadow of her family hanging over her. The next chapter of her life would be one of independence, of carving out her own place in the world, unseen by the family who had never truly seen her. But that was okay, because for the first time in her life, Emma finally understood the value of self-respect, and that, she realized, was the most powerful thing of all.